Hey, folks. This is a great group. Thank you all for joining. We are really excited for this chat, in part because it is the perfect way to open up this RSA conference. And I will just offer a personal short anecdote, which is when I saw this slide as we did our prep materials and I saw the icon Stronger Together, I said, oh, what a great icon for our Cyber National Mission Force and CISA teams to come up with. What a great way to show the cohesion that we are reflecting in this chat. And then I learned, oh, that's actually the icon for the whole conference. But really, what we are going to walk through in our time together today is how our agencies, CISA and Cyber Command's Cyber National Mission Forces, are stronger together in our shared goals of protecting this country and the global community from cyber threats. So we are really excited to be here. We're going to talk through some vignettes, some anecdotes that we haven't talked about before publicly. We hope it's interesting. We hope it's exciting. Most importantly, we hope it reflects the depth of collaboration that we are now seeing within the US government and the fact that none of us can do it alone. And we need every partner, industry, government, international, all rowing in the same direction if we're going to achieve the change that we want to affect.
Thanks, Eric. Hey, to first the organizers, thanks for the invitation. It's an honor to be up here today. For everybody in attendance, thanks for coming. Cybersecurity really is a whole of nation mission, and so very excited to be able to spend time with everybody here today. So Joe Hartman, I command the Cyber National Mission Force, headquartered up at Fort Meade. Really have the mission to defend the nation in cyberspace. We play the away game. We can't execute our mission without great collaboration with organizations like DHS CISA. And so for us, it is all about those partnerships. Really excited to be here to discuss our mission, to talk through some vignettes so you can understand what it really looks like in execution when we collaborate together in order to defend the nation. So again, really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the discussion.
There is a disclaimer here that I think will appear at every panel and session you all attend. I am not going to read it verbatim, in part because I can't look behind me, so I will just assume that whatever the disclaimer says is true, and we shall move forward accordingly. Let me talk for a moment about the agency that I'm privileged to be a part of, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Try saying that 10 times fast. I have the privilege of leading the Cybersecurity Division within CISA. And we're a really neat agency. We're a really unique agency in the global ecosystem because, as many I'm sure are aware, we're not a law enforcement agency, we're not an intel agency, we're not a regulator in cybersecurity. We have one sole and pure focus, which is to help organizations in this country, first and foremost, and around the world with our allies, improve their cybersecurity and become more secure and resilient against the threats we're facing. And we really have one single-threaded outcome that we are seeking, which is a future in which damaging cyber intrusions are less frequent and less impactful. And as we think through this, a through line across today's panel is going to be this concept of how do we increase the cost that our adversaries face? Because of course we know, to use an aphorism that I think Phil Venables at Google Cloud gets credit for, adversaries have bosses and budgets. And we know that if we can increase their costs for every attempted intrusion on an American network, that is going to change their model, that is going to keep our country more safe and more secure. And so at CISA, we're really focused on one angle of that question of imposing cost, which is better defense, better hardening. How can we get organizations to adopt the right controls, the right security measures that are going to reduce classes of attacks? How can we build a more safe and secure technology product ecosystem such that the products that we are all using are more defensible by design? And when intrusions, when campaigns, when vulnerabilities do manifest, how can we act quickly to make sure that that information gets in the hands of those who need it to reduce the prevalence of intrusions that we're facing? But of course, we're only one element of that solution set. And the lodestar for our mission is partnerships. It's collaboration. It's making sure that we are acting as a trusted partner, a trusted convener, a trusted ally to the cybersecurity community, the research community, industry, owners and operators of critical infrastructure, our partners in the US government, and our partners around the world. Because nothing that we do in cybersecurity at CISA is compulsory. We have no sticks or carrots to be at the table. We are all doing our work, and frankly, we are all at this conference because we want to do the right thing. We want to achieve an end state where our country, our world is more secure. And so I'm really eager today to be on the stage with General Hartman to reflect on how CISA's defensive efforts intersect so naturally with the unique authorities and capabilities of Cyber Command's Cyber National Mission Forces, so we can bring together these different elements of cost and position and create a future where damaging cyber intrusions simply aren't tolerable for our adversaries anymore because the cost is too high. That's a future that we can create together. We are taking important steps down that road, but it's one that all of us need to be unified in our attempts to create.
Hey, again, Joe Hartman, commander of the Cyber National Mission Force. Our mission is to defend the nation against malicious cyber actors that threaten our national security. You know, there's some subcategories we can go into in a minute, but that's the bottom line. We do this through people, and we do it through partnerships. I'd first like to talk about the people just a little bit. So we have 2,000 joint service members assigned to the Cyber National Mission Force. And when I say service members, so I don't confuse with military jargon, think Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coasties, and a couple of Guardians from the new Space Force sprinkled across. You know, this is generally a fairly young force. About 20% of it does consist of civilians from various federal agencies that do provide a little bit of continuity and a little bit of experience. But it's a young force, but it's exquisitely trained, it's highly motivated, and every day our force comes to work in order to do everything we can to defend the nation. From a CNMF standpoint, we are foreign focused. We execute operations in foreign space in order to do everything we can to protect the homeland while also supporting our allies and partners. And so it really is based on partnerships. When we see something, whether it's on a hunt forward operation or whether it's on an ISR operation, and it involves something going on in the United States or something going on in foreign space that's a threat to the United States, we have to be able to share it. We have a number of partners across government that we share that information with. We have a number of private industry partners we work with, but no partner is more important than DHS CISA. And on a daily basis, our two organizations are working very closely together to ensure that we're the foreign team, they're the domestic team, and we're doing everything we can in order to support each other's operations. When we're authorized to conduct operations to deny, degrade, disrupt, deter adversaries, we do so, but we do so with precision, we do so with oversight, and we do so in a manner that makes sure we are really governed by the process that we use. And so when we execute cyber operations, we do so at the direction and under the control of the Secretary of Defense, fully in accordance with U.S. and international law, and in compliance with the Department of Defense and governmental policies. We execute those operations to ensure that our adversaries do not have access to the capabilities, the tools, the things that they need to attack our critical infrastructure, to steal our secrets, to execute ransomware operations, or anything else that might threaten the national security of the United States. We execute these operations with precision, we execute these operations under the proper level of oversight, and we execute these operations in a persistent engagement manner that doesn't wait for the adversaries to come to the United States and threaten us. Again, it's a great mission. It's focused in foreign space, but it's only really effective when we're able to partner with key organizations like DHS CISA, which is why I'm really happy to tell our story here today.
So you've already heard a bit about the criticality of this partnership. Well, just another moment on this key point, which is historically, and John Hammond and I have both been in government for a while. I spent some time in the private sector. There's always been a bit of a cliche that government was stovepiped, that companies didn't know who to call, that there was concern that a nugget of information coming into the government ecosystem would fall into a black box, never to be seen again. And we are working with extraordinary urgency to break that model, such that truly a call to one is a call to all. Truly, information shared with CISA is not only shared with the right protections across the defensive community, but also shared to those with the authorities to take action overseas, like our partners in Cyber Command CNMF. And we've taken real steps to make this a reality. There is always more work to do, but in order to build these trust-based collaborative partnerships with the private sector, with other governments, we need to make sure that within government, that we have broken down those walls, that we have those processes, those people, those technologies well-tuned such that we can share information not just effectively, but also at the speed of cybersecurity. And so one of the things that we'll get into today is showing how not only are we sharing information with each other to enable action, we're doing it quickly, right? Because if there's some data shared that enables some action against an adversary weeks or months from now, that's not going to achieve the right effect. And so we have to get this flywheel of sharing really down to a science, building an automation where possible, so we can actually move at the right speed such that our adversaries really take notice and change their behavior, ideally by executing fewer intrusions against the entities that we care about most.
Thanks, Eric. I think it's really important for everybody in here, to really understand that on a daily basis, the Cyber National Mission Force and DHS CISA work side by side. And when I say side by side, I don't just mean in a chat room, which we certainly do. We have liaison officers that are at each other's locations, from senior leaders down to individual analysts or operators. On a daily basis, we are collaborating, really focused on two things. What information does DHS CISA have relevant to the department's mission that might allow us to execute an operation to disrupt an ongoing or prevent a future attack in the United States? From our standpoint, what are we seeing when we execute operations in foreign space, when we collaborate with our partners, when we execute hunt forward operations? What threats are we seeing that the partner allows us to share back with DHS CISA relevant to the threats that we face in the United States? We live in an interesting time in that, a threat a foreign partner sees, a threat to government networks. It's also a threat to the networks of, that many of the people in this room either own or provide support to. And I would offer that, we have not been in this position as it relates to a foreign threat really at any other time during our history. And so a threat to us is a threat to you. It's also a threat to other government systems, and we have to share information rapidly if we're going to remediate those threats. So again, glad to be here to talk about this today.
Indeed. So I'm sure you are all really eager to get into actually what we are doing operationally, and so we'll move to that moment. I just want to really double down on this concept of bi-directional enabling to achieve collective defense, because that's really what our country and the global community needs, wants, demands, deserves, is that we are able to effectively enable each other's operations, CISA to defend domestic networks, Cyber Command CNMF to take action against our adversaries overseas in a way that really does bring to bear the best of our authorities, our resources, our capabilities. But one really clear through line that you're going to hear in the vignettes that we get to in just a moment is the fact that none of these vignettes were just CISA and CNMF operating alone. They all involved critical work by a private sector party, by a victim, by an allied partner. All of these involve the community as a whole. So even as we work urgently to make sure that our teams are fully aligned, fully mature, fully effective, we need to plug in effectively to all of the extraordinary work happening across the community to make sure that we have the information we need, and we're pushing the information that the community needs outward to actually achieve that broader change.
Thanks, Eric. You know, for each of our organizations here, okay, we each have unique authorities. We also each have unique insights. And so for us to be really effective, it's a result of bringing together the largest number of organizations that have unique authorities and or unique insights in order to deal with a specific problem. I hope the vignettes that we show you today will sort of bear some of that out. But again, we're up here to talk about the great relationship between CNMF and DHS-CISA, but as Eric highlights, it's really much broader than that. And at the end of the day, the more partners that we're able to bring to bear on a problem, the better results we're going to have. Hey, so let's talk about the SolarWinds incident. All right, and so I believe everybody in this room will be tracking. Okay, a SVR attributed supply chain hack that occurred in 2020. The first really important piece here is FireEye alerted both the government and the private sector of this supply chain hack. All right, I cannot emphasize that enough. Okay, a private sector organization identified a threat and they widely shared the information. Once that occurred, there are a number of things that we on the Department of Defense, we in the U.S. government side, start to do in order to remediate the threat.
So from the point of view of CISA, when we got this tip from our partners at FireEye Mandiant, I can't remember what their corporate name was at that point in time, it's changed a lot. When we got this tip from our partners, as well as amplifying information, as we'll get into from Cyber Command CNMF and our partners at the NSA, we immediately jumped into action. And using our native visibility at CISA, using tipping from Mandiant FireEye to the impacted agencies, from partners like Microsoft, we were able to rapidly identify 9 agencies that appeared to have been impacted by the SolarWinds campaign, which of course we know broadly was a campaign targeting Microsoft Office 365 identity infrastructure. We kicked off incident responses at many of those victim agencies, in many cases hand in hand with private sector incident response firms, whether Mandiant, Microsoft Dart, or many others, and undertook the initial steps to understand the breadth of the intrusions, understand the phases of the backdoor and the payload, and derive actionable artifacts that we could use to enable the community's broader response. As part of this effort, we began to identify, extract, and image the compromised SolarWinds servers that were used by many of these 9 identified impacted agencies. And as we imaged those servers, we instantaneously shared that information with our partners at CNMF for use in their operations.
So the ability to gain access to an image of the compromised server, invaluable for us. All right, so what do we do with that information? We immediately mock that up in our virtual training environment, and then we start to hone our skills to hunt for similar adversary activity across a number of our mission elements. We're the Department of Defense. We're really good at this. It's what we do, okay? And over time, and when I say time, a number of days, we're able to really develop a high-end capability to hunt for this adversary about the same time that intelligence from the intelligence community indicated to us that we had a partner, a foreign partner, that had been compromised by the same actor. All right, image from DHS-CISA, very deliberate rehearsal exercises, deployment of a team overseas. All right, because of the information that was shared from DHS-CISA, we knew exactly what we were looking for. All right, and as we started to execute our Hunt Forward operation, we almost immediately saw adversary activity. The important part here is because of the relationship and because of the preparation, not only were we able to gain access to the adversary, but we were able to do so in a manner that the adversary didn't know we were there. All right, and so now we see an active intrusion, we're collecting information, and we're immediately sharing that information back with DHS CISA and other partners. We were eventually able to collect 18 pieces of novel malware. With permission from the partner, we were able to bring that malware back to the United States and share it very broadly. And for us, just a model mission. You know, one of the members that deployed on that mission was a young airman. And when the young airman was executing operations looking for the SVR activity, we saw what we believe was the activity, but as he explained to me, the SVR had hidden it in legitimate processes in the network in an attempt to obfuscate where they were operating. Similar to the image we rehearsed on, a little bit different, hidden in the mission partner network that we were operating on. But you know, the young airman looked at me when he got back and he said, "Sir, the Russians didn't know that I like to solve puzzles." And at the end of the day, we were able to figure out what was going on the network. With the partner's permission, we were able to bring that information back, broadly share it, and we were able to help the mission partner overseas remediate their network, and so the SVR no longer had access to their network.
And now back to the public part. As we continued our incident responses across the 9 impacted federal agencies, we of course realized that the broader community needed guidance. The broader community needed some understanding of the breadth of the campaign, the TTPs that the SVR actors were using, and how to make steps towards detection and mitigation. And so we worked together with partners across the community to develop our public cybersecurity advisory in April 2021, which I'm sure many of you received at the time and reviewed. But the key linkage here is this advisory benefited not only from what CISA was seeing on victim agencies, benefiting not only what our partners like Mandiant FireEye and Microsoft were seeing from their visibility, but also what our partners at CNMF were gleaning from networks abroad. And bringing all of this together, we were able to paint a comprehensive, high-confidence tapestry of this campaign, of the TTPs, of the mitigations that we know would be most impactful. But after we put on this advisory, we also realized, you know what, some of the victims need more. Some of the victims need to really understand, how do they have confidence that this SVR actor set has actually been evicted from the network? And so we work closely with our partners at agencies, including CNMF and NSA, partners in industry like Mandiant, like Microsoft, to develop our eviction guide, which is actually the first time that CISA has ever put out very clear step-by-step guidance to say, if you have been affected by this campaign and you want to have a reasonable level of assurance that this adversary is actually out, given the unique persistence both of this actor and this particular intrusion, here are steps to take. But we would never have had that degree of fidelity if not, of course, for information from industry, but also information that CNMF was able to yield from their Hunt Forward mission. So this really brought together our efforts domestically to do incident response, to collaborate with our partners, and to leverage information that our partners can pull back from overseas to make sure that our community has the best possible information with the highest possible rigor, highest possible confidence to actually detect, respond, recover most effectively.
Hey, so the next vignette we would like to talk about is the large-scale Chinese compromise that was attributed by industry partners as the Hafnium operation. And so this is another example of an industry partner providing information to the government, to include the Cyber National Mission Force, about an ongoing intrusion on a fairly large-scale level. All right, again, industry partner alerts the government, alerts private industry, and the team immediately starts to collaborate. This is an operation where initially most of the information was available not in DoD intelligence channels, but in the private sector. The collaboration that occurred over a period of days, and again, just to highlight how these things occur, for us, I don't mean industry tipped us and then a couple of weeks later we reached out and decided we'd have a meeting somewhere. All right, literally overnight, teams got together and they started to evaluate what could be done in order to disrupt an ongoing operation, but in this case, also prevent these accesses from being used in the future. All right, the CNMF was able to get access to the malware. We were able to use that malware to remediate compromised servers overseas, to prevent those servers from being used to execute future collection operations or future attacks against the United States. Additionally, we were able to share that malware and the techniques with U.S. government partners, but most notably with Eric's team at DHS.
And this is, of course, the campaign where what was striking was the breadth. We know the Microsoft Exchange Server is pervasively used across organizations, across sectors, large and small, U.S. and abroad. And so the ask that we heard from the community, loud and clear, was, what do we do? How do we prioritize? What do we look for? Everybody is using Microsoft Exchange. We can't deprecate Microsoft Exchange Server. Where do we go? What do we do? And so having this information from the CNMF operation that we were then able to bring together, to combine with reporting from industry, to amplify, and then using our national visibility, look for organizations that were still running vulnerable versions of Exchange Server, reach out to them and say, hey, very tactically, here is what to look for. If you see any of these indicators, if you see these hashes, you got to take some really urgent steps. And oh, by the way, you should also be patching. But this enabled our guidance to be actionable and targeted in a way that, frankly, otherwise wouldn't have met the very real demand for our stakeholders to bite on this risk.
Hey, so we're going to talk about election security, and before we get into the vignette, all right, there is no more important mission than ensuring that there are safe and secure elections, so safe and secure from foreign influence, safe and secure from foreign interference. Over the last 3 election cycles, the Cyber National Mission Force, 2 of those for me and 1 for my predecessor, have been privileged to co-chair the election security group with a senior executive from the National Security Agency. And when we execute these missions, again, there is no higher priority, nor is there a higher honor than to be involved in this work.
Yeah, I just really building on General Hartman's point, CISA's role in supporting state and local election officials really is one of our top priorities, and indeed, I'd even call it a sacred calling for us, right? The state and local officials who are accountable to safeguard our country's election infrastructure, safeguard our democracy, really are heroes. Many of them are doing this work with limited resources, with limited capacity, and they are standing on the front lines against very real potential threats. And so at CISA, we are privileged to be the Sector Risk Management Agency for the election subsector, and our goal is to ensure that our state and local partners have all of the guidance, the information, the services, the allyship that they need to do their jobs and maximally secure these critical systems that enable our democracy to function so effectively. And that's why our collaboration here, both with CNMF and NSA, is so critical to make sure that not only are we ahead of time supporting state and local election officials in getting everything that they need to do their jobs most effectively, but we're also working to get ahead of our adversaries so that if we do see activity manifesting, ideally we can get ahead of it and stop it before a negative event happens, and that's exactly what occurred with this vignette.
So in this operation, we were executing what we call a cyber intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission in foreign space when we detected an Iranian MCA called Pioneer Kitten. All right, we detected that malicious cyber actor had gained access to a city's local infrastructure that would be used to report the results of voting for the 2020 elections. All right, to be clear, this isn't infrastructure involved in casting a vote. It isn't infrastructure involved in counting votes. But our concern is always that some type of website defacement, some type of DDoS attack, something that took the website down or defaced the website, say on the night of the election, could make it look like the vote had been tampered with when that's absolutely not true. All right, so in this case, we're executing foreign operations. We identify a threat. We immediately ask a number of questions. The first question is, who needs to know? All right, the next question is, who needs to be protected from this? And the third question is, who can do something about this? And I'd want to first just pass it to Eric and let you talk about, on the DHS-CISA side of the house, how you approach this information.
Absolutely. So whenever we receive this kind of actionable information, our first priority is to notify the potential victim and offer help. And in this case, we were able to immediately get in contact with the potentially impacted jurisdiction, offer them incident response support, and with this information from the CNMF mission, they were able to rapidly remediate the intrusion before any impact could have occurred. And so I will just reiterate General Hartman's point here that there was no impact to election infrastructure, no impact to voting systems, no impact to the free and fair conduct of the election. This is a case where we had an adversary with the potential intent to take action relating to an election, and we were able to effectively get in front of that activity, detect it rapidly through the CNMF operation, make contact with the jurisdiction, work hand in hand with the jurisdiction to remediate before any impact could occur, and then have assurance that the system was safe, secure, resilient. And again, this was not a system used in the conduct of the election, but we are of course also concerned with systems that could weigh on the perception of a potential compromise, and that is why this work was so important and so critical to get ahead of this activity and ensure that the victim jurisdiction had all they needed to ensure that their systems were safe, secure, resilient, protected well in advance of the election occurring.
And from a CNMF standpoint, while Eric's team was working very closely with the jurisdiction in question, the CNMF, again, under the direction and control of the secretary, under the conditions that we previously talked about, executed cyber operations to ensure the malicious cyber actor no longer had access to the network and was unable to come back into the network in direct support of the elections. And so again, a series of questions, who needs to know? All right, obviously CNMF, obviously DHS, obviously other partners. Who needs to be protected? In this case, the victim. All right, and then who has the authorities to do something about it? In this case, certainly DHS-CISA had the authority to work with the U.S. entity, and then the CNMF had the authority to go out and execute operations in foreign space to disrupt an ongoing intrusion and prevent it from occurring again.
So thus far we've talked about this extraordinary collaboration moving in a particular direction, which is CNMF operations being used to enable more effective defense of the homeland. But we're also executing operations that run the other way. As one example, recently using our sensor grid that's deployed across federal civilian agencies, we identified 3 federal agencies facing an intrusion campaign from foreign-based cyber criminals. We could see the connections to known adversary command and control infrastructure. We could see adversary attempts to harvest credentials. Obviously, an issue of real heightened concern. And so, as we all do in such cases at CISA on a daily basis, we reached out to the agencies immediately, notified them of the activity, gave them guidance on the mitigations to take, and kicked off an incident response to ensure that they had taken the needed steps to cut off the attack paths, begin to remediate, identify any potential impact of the intrusion. At the same time, and simultaneously with all that work to protect those federal agencies, we gathered all this information about the adversary infrastructure, what they were doing, where it was coming from, and we shared that really quickly with our partners at CNMF.
Yeah, so the ability for DHS CISA to rapidly provide us information has become a large driver for CNMF operations around the globe. And so for us, information shared, we immediately evaluate the information, we ensure that it fits within the authorities that we operate under, and then we look to what are the things that we might do in order to, again, either disrupt an ongoing threat or deter a future threat. I just want to highlight that this isn't something that we would be talking about if this was a couple of years ago. All right, the maturation in this relationship and the fact that it happens real time, every day, has really become a significant driver for our mission, and really credit Eric and team's forward-looking approach to push information that is relevant to the department's mission in a manner that we can rapidly make use of it.
I mentioned this example of these three agencies. This is a model that we are working rapidly to scale. We've supported CNMF with information that we've derived from targeting of K-12 educational institutions, of universities, and we are now broadening across sectors. And our goal here is to really create this flywheel effect, to make sure that when there is an intrusion targeting a U.S. organization, that we can rapidly derive the right technical information to hand over to CNMF teams for evaluation, for use in potential operations overseas, and that when CNMF derives information that is actionable for defenders, that's rapidly shared back in. And back to where we started. We think that this model is critical to really get to that level of cost and position against our adversaries that we need. Because if we do one of these operations where there's an intrusion on a U.S. entity, CISA shares information with CNMF, CNMF executes an operation overseas, if we do that one time, the adversaries aren't going to care. If we do it twice, the adversaries aren't going to care. But if we keep doing it at scale, and we keep doing it while imposing all of the other levers at our disposal, better enterprise cybersecurity controls, investment in product safety, action taken against the individuals who are behind these intrusions, that is how we increase cost. And that's why we are so excited that we now have this bi-directional enabling that's really maturing to ensure that, frankly, our adversaries understand that if you target American networks, there are going to be consequences, and those consequences are going to be rapid.
Hey, we'd like to talk just a little bit about ransomware. We're not going to be able to get into the specific vignettes that we had on previous operations, but it is an important topic to talk about. When we say ransomware, look, I know that the ransomware model has changed, all right? And so ransomware, extortionware, harassment, DDoS, anything a malicious cyber actor can do, in order to put an entity in a position where they are more likely to pay a ransom. Okay, as it continues to morph, we're going to continue to really work hard in this space, and I'll just offer a couple of thoughts after Eric provides DHS's perspective.
Terrific. So, ransomware remains an issue of extraordinary concern to all of us in this community. There are still far too many organizations, large and small, across sectors, being impacted by ransomware intrusions. At CISA, we are privileged to co-chair with our partners at the FBI, the Joint Ransomware Task Force, of which DoD is a charter member, with the intention of bringing together with cohesion all of the work that's occurring in the US government, in the private sector, with allied governments, so we are all pointing in the same direction. We are focused in a few areas in this context. We're focusing on making sure that we know how ransomware attacks occur, and we are closing down those accesses across the country. And we have an initiative that we call the Ransomware Vulnerability Warning Pilot, where we are constantly scanning US IP space for vulnerabilities that we know ransomware actors are using. If we see those vulnerabilities open on US organizations, they're gonna get a call or a knock from our regional personnel out in the field across the country and say, hey, we know you probably have a lot of vulnerabilities you're working on. You should really close this one down before you have a ransomware event. We're also undertaking an effort that we call the Pre-Ransomware Notification Initiative, where we get tips from researchers, from industry, who can see the C2 connections with known infrastructure operated by ransomware groups. They can see that there's been an intrusion, and they can see that the payload hasn't yet been detonated. So then we've got a window of hours, maybe days, not longer, where we can get out there and say, hey, we got a host ID, we got credentials, we got the egress path. You got to re-image this host right now. You got to block these IPs right now. And we're doing this increasingly at scale. We've done 160 of these notifications this year alone across the US and with international partners. And we think that combined with the work we've discussed here, this is all part of the broader model to move away from the theoretical and more to the applied, and really focus on actionable, measurable risk reduction work. Are we closing down the vulnerabilities that we know malicious actors, particularly ransomware groups, use? Are we getting ahead of intrusions that occur to limit impact? And are we sharing information to enable cost of position against our adversaries abroad? We feel like these are all tools in the quiver that over time, and hopefully not long, will actually make a real difference in the prevalence of intrusions that are targeting US organizations.
Hey, from a CNMF standpoint, we have a joint task force that is laser focused on everything we can do to counter the ecosystem that ransomware, extortionware actors need. The threat is broad, all right, and so the threat to small and local businesses is also a threat to U.S. critical infrastructure, the defense industrial base, our own Department of Defense networks, and so it is a threat that we are laser focused on. As Eric highlighted, we're focused on the away game, but we also do that in great partnership with DHS CISA, with FBI, with NCIJTF, with the Department of Justice, with private industry, who oftentimes is able to provide us lead information as it relates to a foreign threat that under our authorities we are able to go out and help mitigate. For us, it has been an interesting maturation of the relationship among both government and private industry partners, as we're able to work with a broader number of organizations to get after this threat. I appreciate the announcement by Microsoft and Forta about what they're doing to get after cracked instances of Cobalt Strike. Again, really important when, private industry leverages their expertise in order to help get after a threat that we all face. Hey, so for me, I'm really gonna kind of go back to where I started, okay? It is all about people, and it is all about partnerships. And for us, we've talked about the professionals that are in the CNMF, but it's working with the professionals in DHS CISA. We're fortunate to sit at the National Security Agency campus, really in all the locations that we have service members, and the ability to access that expertise is fantastic. But increasingly, over the last number of years, we have realized that partnership with private industry, while working very closely with Eric's team at JCDC, really allows us to get at scale in ways that previously we were unable to. For us, we established a small organization called Under Advisement that is really focused on, voluntary bidirectional sharing of information between industry partners and CNMF that relate to the department's mission to execute operations in foreign space. It is also a way for us to take information that we've gained in foreign space that is shareable back with private industry partners. It has been a huge force multiplier for us, and the partnerships that we've really developed for me have been significant. I do want to highlight that, clearly when we're talking about partnerships in the United States, it's Eric's team, it's DHS CISA that's the lead, and we stay very closely linked in with JCDC.
I'll just close us out, and we are remarkably on time, so kudos for all concerned. There's been a real through line through this conversation, which is, even though General Hartman and I are really excited about the progress that our teams have made in building this partnership, in operationalizing it, in making it tangible, real, measurable, none of these vignettes were undertaken by CISA or CNMF alone. They all required other partners to be involved, to take action, to collaborate. And so the call to action today is, let's collectively move towards this model where we are executing with intentionality those activities that most measurably reduce risk to our country. One of the greatest challenges that we face is that the vast majority of cyber incidents are never reported in the federal government. It doesn't matter who you report to, FBI, CISA, Secret Service. We need to get to a culture where we stop blaming the victim, where we see cyber intrusions as attacks on our national security, prosperity, and ways of life that must be dealt with as such, and to a culture where every incident is reported every time, and when it is reported, we have a culture of collaboration that's reciprocal, that's transparent, that's frictionless, and that enables organizations across the world with authority, with capabilities, with resources to take action against the threat. In many cases, there may be governments, it may also be private industry. But we need to create that world together. I hope that today, one reflection is that we are making progress in the US government towards that goal, with, of course, more work to do every day, but we have to do it together. And so grateful for all of your time today, for the collaboration to come. If you are not already working with CISA, please do reach out to us. We also have some awesome team members. I will call out Jordan and Matt in the front row from JCDC here. I will volunteer them to have any conversations about the work we do. And thanks to all of you for the work we're doing. If there's one takeaway from RSA, it is that we are a community. We are all here for the right thing, which is making the world safer, and we're here to do our part. Thanks all.